Dun dun dun.
To restart my vlog type thing about whatever I feel like talking about at any given point in time, I'm going to talk about something that's been bugging me for the past quite a while. Ideology. Ideology is a strange thing. It's automatic. That's the problem. It's where people think they have solutions simply based on a belief. They have no data, they have no evidence. They just know that something is right or wrong. They just know that's the solution because someone told it. It's the automatic application of a creed. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Let's take your typical liberal versus conservative slant, right? I mean, okay, government intervention is bad. Why is it bad? Why is it, government intervention is good. Why is it good? There was an article in Time recently on how modern conservatism has basically lost the plot and no longer has anything to do with anything. And it strikes me as relatively accurate. I mean, the same people who claim that you expect the government to do anything right, and yet they'll wholeheartedly support the military, which, last time I checked, due to American history not liking mercenaries very much, is a wholly government-owned, unoperated system. And of course, the fact that we now have a military-industrial complex. I mean, people who know me know that I'm not exactly a shrinking violet. I am something of a militarist, but we have 11 aircraft carriers. We have more military power than the rest of the world combined. And the only nations that can keep up with us are those that spent money on missiles, on nukes, because at that point they're just playing spoiler. It's only after the end of the Cold War that we noticed that, hey, the Russians, other than in Europe, really, literally just Europe, the Russians couldn't actually oppose us militarily, and they were spending money on submarines and missiles as a spoiler to our military power. And the reason why they kept building up in Eastern Europe was because they thought we were going to invade them, which makes perfect sense considering Russian history and how everybody decides to, every Western power decides to go east. And they had just gotten tired of being invaded. Especially once you have it goes back to ideology. Once you have two opposing ideologies, the Soviets thought that they were right, lacking evidence, because it hadn't been quite tried yet, and they gave the evidence that it doesn't work. And opposed to us, who we thought that they were an existential threat, so we treated them as such. And by treating them as an existential threat, we became an existential threat to them, and things got silly. And I see all these arguments on policy. Not morality. We'll set that aside. Morality is all a matter of opinion and honest, to be mostly honest, bullshit. There is no morality. There's only us. We define what is right and wrong. But that's an argument for another day. But, I mean, in terms of policy, where you have, despite the system being extremely complex, you still have input and output. You still have data that you can collect and decide whether this works or that works. Now, I understand the argument that especially the libertarian movement argues that it is better to have private industry operate because private industry is more responsive. Look at the failures of the Soviet command economy and of the current Cuban command economy. I mean, that much is true. But the problem then becomes is that the market isn't free and it isn't free. It can't be free because people are operating it. If we give tax cuts to the rich are not rich because they spend money. They do spend money, but they spend it strategically. There's data. There is information. There is research in one end and out the other about how rich people tend to save more. And so trying to stimulate an overall economy by handing money to people who will only save it is not a good idea. The data are against it. There's nothing to support that assertion. And yet people talk about it like it's the word of God, which I guess is the problem. Ideologies, philosophies, religions, they're all the same thing. They're all made up, and they're all predicated on an automatic belief, usually by some authority figure speaking it, and then a bunch of people going for it. At first it has to sound vaguely rational, because if it was completely crazy, no one would ever follow it, except for the very outliers of society. But then it catches on, and it takes a life on of its own. I am a relatively cynical person, yes, but I'm not so cynical as to let it blind me to what I think are the realities of the situation. A lot of people like to think that, oh, the rich are out to get us, or, you know, corporations are really out to hold their workers down, and that, or like religious leaders are really just cynically abusing religious power. No, no, no. Everybody generally tries to do what they think is right. This includes your Hitlers. This includes your Stalins. They're not villains twiddling their mustaches and snickering like Snidely Whiplash. They're people, and so they're doing what they think is right, and they're doing what the system allows and rewards. So if the objective is to make money, as it is in a capitalist system, and it's cheaper to hire illegal immigrants under the table, then you're going to do that. And only, one or two people bending the rules doesn't harm anything. But when it becomes standard, essentially, that's when things go wrong. Because the system can so many people are acting outside of the legitimate system that the legitimate system can no longer compensate. The overall system will do what it does. And again, there are difficulties in analyzing these kinds of systems because it's reciprocal. The system is self-aware after a fashion. Its individual components are aware of themselves and of each other, and if they are informed of their place in the system, then they can change it, and the system will evolve. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible or it shouldn't be done, but that you can actually apply scientific methods to catch a state of the evolutionary system that it's in at a given point in time, and then use that to make decisions. Now, those decisions won't be constant because the system is not a constant. It's in a state of flux. It's always trying to reach equilibrium. But because it's so complex, it's a punctuated equilibrium, or it's a moving average. So you do it again and again and again, and that would seem to be the rational way to do it. But no one ever tries because people already have the solutions. And yeah, I've really picked on the conservatives on this one, but the liberals have the same problem. Government regulation does appear to be necessary going by what information we have, but too much regulation, you do indeed stifle the system and choke it to death. Soviet Russia did it. I guess I should say Soviet Union. Let's not pick out the Russians. And of course, I wish there was a way forward. There is a logical way forward, but we are not logical actors, so it's not a matter of, well, let's do the research and get it done. It's people want to believe what they want to believe, and there's enough research to indicate that if they're told otherwise, that oftentimes just makes them believe harder, because it's a matter of their self-definition. So yeah, 10 minutes of that. Shine on, Internet.